The wagon lurched over rough terrain, and Eowyn pressed herself deeper into the narrow space between wooden crates and bundled furs. Every muscle in her body screamed from hours of stillness, but she dared not shift her weight. One sound, one breath too loud, and everything she had risked would be for nothing. Through a crack in the wagon's slats, moonlight sliced across her face. She could see shadows of riders flanking the convoy, their silhouettes massive against the star-scattered sky. These were not ordinary men. She had watched them earlier from her hiding spot in the forest, had seen them load supplies with strength that bordered on unnatural, had noticed how their eyes caught the firelight and reflected it back like animals. She should have chosen a different wagon. A merchant's cart heading south toward the ports, anywhere but north, into the wild territories where men whispered of beasts that walked upright and kings who ruled with fang and claw. But south meant Varric. South meant the soul-binding ritual that awaited her at dawn. South meant becoming an empty vessel, her power ripped from her spirit and claimed by a man whose cruelty knew no limits. Eowyn touched her wrist where the betrothal mark still burned against her skin, the first stage of the binding that Varric had forced upon her 3 days ago. The ink had been mixed with her blood, and she could feel it pulsing beneath her flesh like a second heartbeat, calling her back to him. She would die before she answered that call. The wagon stopped without warning. Eowyn's heart seized. Around her, she heard voices speaking in a language that was both familiar and strange, the old tongue of the northern clans. Musical and sharp, footsteps crunched on frost-hardened ground, circling the wagon. Something's wrong. The voice was deep, authoritative. It resonated through the wooden walls and settled somewhere in Eowyn's chest. I smell blood. She pressed her hand harder against her side, where the wound from her escape still seeped through the makeshift bandage. Foolish. She had been so focused on hiding that she had forgotten her own bleeding body would betray her. The canvas covering was ripped away. Cold air rushed in, and Eowyn found herself staring up at the largest man she had ever seen. He stood framed against the night sky, shoulders broad enough to block the moon, dark hair falling past his jaw. But it was his eyes that stole her breath, pale gray, almost silver, glowing with an inner light that was decidedly not human. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Eowyn watched those storm-colored eyes travel over her, the torn dress, the blood-soaked fabric at her side, the dark circles of exhaustion beneath her eyes. She watched him take in the betrothal mark on her wrist, saw his gaze narrow at the sight of it. Please, the word escaped before she could stop it. I am not a threat to you. I only needed to escape. I will leave your wagon and trouble you no more. The man's expression betrayed nothing. He turned his head slightly and spoke to someone she could not see. Brennan, we have a stowaway. Another man appeared beside him, leaner but with the same predatory grace. His eyes widened when he saw Eowyn. A woman? Here? A bleeding woman, the first man corrected. His pale gaze returned to Eowyn's face, and she felt the weight of his attention like a physical force. With a Valdrian binding mark on her wrist, Eowyn's blood chilled. He recognized the mark. He knew what it meant. She is bound to someone, Brennan said, suspicion sharpening his voice. A spy, perhaps, or bait for a trap. I am no spy, Eowyn said quickly. I fled the binding. Lord Varric, he discovered what I am. He means to complete the ritual and take my... She stopped herself. Too much. She was saying too much. Take your what? The man leaned closer, and Eowyn caught his scent pine and wood smoke and something wild beneath it. What does Lord Varric want from you badly enough to mark you with blood magic? Eowyn pressed her lips together. She had already revealed too much to these strangers, these northern men with their glowing eyes and inhuman strength. The man studied her silence for a long moment. Then, to her shock, he extended his hand. You are bleeding out in my wagon, he said. Whatever secrets you carry, they will die with you if that wound is not treated. So you have a choice, little stowaway. Come with me and live, or stay here and die. Choose. Eowyn stared at his outstretched hand. The choice was no choice at all. She reached up and let him pull her from the wagon. His name was Chaol, and he was the Alpha King of the Thornwood realm. Eowyn learned this not from him. He had spoken barely a dozen words since pulling her from the wagon, but from the whispers of his men as they made camp in a sheltered valley. She sat near a fire that crackled with unnatural warmth, a fur draped over her shoulders, while an elderly woman named Morna cleaned and stitched the wound at her side. You are lucky, Morna said in accented common tongue. Another hour and the blood loss would have killed you. Lucky, Eowyn repeated hollowly. The word felt foreign. Nothing about the past 3 days had felt like luck. Across the camp, she could see Chaol standing with Brennan and 2 other men, their heads bent in urgent conversation. Occasionally, that moonlit gaze would lift to find her across the flames, and each time, Eowyn felt something twist in her chest. He had saved her. She still did not understand why. "The Alpha does not trust easily," Morna said, following Eowyn's gaze. "But he has never turned away someone in genuine need. It is both his greatest strength and his most dangerous weakness." "Why dangerous?" Eowyn asked. Morna's weathered face grew serious. "Because there are those who would exploit such mercy, who would send a wounded lamb into the wolf's den to learn its secrets." "I am no lamb," Eowyn said quietly, "and I have no interest in secrets. I only want to survive." Morna studied her for a long moment, something knowing in her dark eyes. "Survival," she said, "is often more complicated than we imagine." Before Eowyn could respond, footsteps approached, and then Chaol was standing before her, his massive frame blocking the firelight. He crouched down to her level, and this close, she could see the sharp angles of his face, the faint scars that crossed his jaw and temple. "The binding mark," he said without preamble. "It is incomplete." Eowyn instinctively covered her wrist. "Yes, but it calls to its maker. Varric will be able to track you through it." Her stomach dropped. "I know. I hoped I thought if I put enough distance between us." "Distance means nothing to blood magic." Chaol's voice held no judgment, only grim certainty. "He will find you. The only question is when." Tears burned behind Eowyn's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She had not wept when Varric had forced the mark upon her. She had not wept when she had driven a knife into his guard's throat to escape. She would not weep now. "Then I will keep running," she said. "I will not go back to him. I would rather die." Chaol searched her face with quiet intensity. "What did he discover about you? What secret is worth blood binding and flight and death?" Eowyn looked away, into the flames. The fire danced and crackled, and in its depths, she imagined she could see the faces of everyone she had failed to save. Her mother, her sister, the village boy who had drowned when she was 12, and the ones she had saved. The ones who had looked at her afterward with horror instead of gratitude. "I cannot tell you," she whispered. "Cannot or will not." "Both." She met his gaze again. "Please. I mean you and your people no harm. Just let me go. I will find another way to disappear." For a long moment, Chaol said nothing. Then he rose to his full height and turned to Morna. "She stays with us until the wound heals. We ride at first light." "Chaol," Brennan's voice carried a warning as he approached. "She is bound to a Valdrian lord. If we harbor her, it could mean war." "Varric has been looking for a reason to push into our territory for years," Chaol replied evenly. "He will find one whether we shelter this woman or not. At least this way, I choose the terms of the conflict." Brennan's jaw tightened, but he said nothing more. Chaol looked down at Eowyn one last time. "Rest. You are safe here, at least for tonight." He walked away before she could respond, leaving her to stare after him with a storm of confusion in her chest. Why was he protecting her? What did he want in return? Eowyn pulled the fur tighter around her shoulders, but she could not stop shivering, and somewhere deep in her bones, beneath the pulse of the binding mark, she felt something else stirring, something that had nothing to do with blood magic. 3 days passed in a blur of travel and fitful rest. The Thornwood convoy moved through landscapes that grew increasingly wild, dense forests, giving way to craggy peaks, the air turning sharp with the scent of pine and snow. Eowyn rode in the wagon that had been her hiding place, but now she sat openly among the supplies, watching the northern territory unfold around her. She saw no towns, no villages, no signs of civilization, only the ancient forest and the men who moved through it like shadows. They were not men at all. She had realized this by the second night, when she had woken to the sound of wolves howling and emerged from her tent to find the camp empty of human forms. Instead, massive wolves had circled the perimeter, their eyes reflecting firelight in shades of silver and gold. In the morning, the men had returned, and no one spoke of what she had seen. Chaol had kept his distance, issuing commands through Brennan and observing her only from afar. But Eowyn felt his attention like a weight on her skin, knew when his gaze found her across the camp even when she could not see him. On the 4th night, the binding mark on her wrist flared with sudden heat. Eowyn gasped, clutching her arm as pain lanced through her veins. The mark was glowing beneath her skin, the intricate lines pulsing with sickly green light. "He is searching," she realized. "Varric is reaching through the bond, trying to find me." She stumbled from her tent, desperate for cold air, for anything to distract from the burning. The camp was quiet, the fires banked low. She made it only a few steps before her knees buckled. Strong arms caught her before she hit the ground. "Easy." Chaol's voice rumbled through her, and Elowen found herself pressed against his chest, his hands gripping her upper arms. What is happening? The mark, she managed through gritted teeth. He is trying to activate the binding from a distance. It should not be possible, but another wave of pain cut off her words. Kale's expression hardened. Without a word, he lifted her as if she weighed nothing and carried her toward his tent. Elowen was too weak to protest, too focused on fighting the magic that clawed through her blood. Inside, he laid her on a pile of furs and knelt beside her. "Show me." Elowen hesitated, then pulled back her sleeve to reveal the binding mark. The green light pulsed like a diseased heartbeat, and the veins around it had begun to darken. Kale's face went pale. Blood magic corruption. I have seen this before. He looked at her sharply. If this continues, the binding will complete itself whether you consent or not. Varric will own your soul. I know, Elowen whispered. Tears finally spilled down her cheeks. I thought I had more time. I thought, there may be a way to break it. Kale's voice was rough. But you would have to trust me completely. How? He was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice had dropped to something almost gentle. My people are not human. You have seen this. We are shifters wolves bound to human form by choice, not necessity. Our magic is old. Older than the blood rituals of Valdris. Elowen stared at him, heart-pounding. I suspected. I was not certain. A claiming bite, Kale continued. From an alpha can override lesser bonds. It would sever Varric's hold on you completely. A claiming bite, Elowen repeated slowly. That sounds like it would bind you to me instead. Kyle held her gaze, unflinching. I will not lie to you. It is an exchange of one bond for another, but I swear on my blood and my crown that I would never use it to control you. It would be protection, nothing more. The binding mark pulsed again, and Elowen cried out as fresh pain ripped through her. She could feel Varric at the other end of the magic, his cold satisfaction, his certainty that she would break. Do it, she gasped. Please, anything but him. Kale's hands cradled her face, forcing her to meet his gaze. You must be certain. There is no undoing this. I am certain. The words came from somewhere deeper than thought. I would rather belong to a wolf than a monster. Something flickered in his eyes, surprise. Perhaps, or something softer. He leaned closer, and Elowen felt his breath warm against her throat. Forgive me, he murmured. This will hurt. His teeth sank into the curve of her neck where it met her shoulder. Pain exploded through Elowen, sharp and immediate, followed by something else entirely. Heat that was not pain, spreading through her veins like liquid fire. She heard herself cry out, felt her hands grip Kale's shoulders as her body arched against him. The binding mark on her wrist flared brilliant green, then began to crack like dried mud. Pieces of the magical tattoo flaked away, leaving raw pink skin beneath. And still the heat spread, replacing the corruption with something wild and fierce and utterly foreign. When Kale finally lifted his head, Elowen was trembling in his arms, tears streaming down her face. But the pain was gone. The cold presence of Varric was gone. In its place was warmth, and the distant echo of a wolf's heartbeat that somehow matched her own. It is done, Kale said, his voice strained. You are free of him. Elowen touched her throat, where she could feel the tender marks of his teeth. What happens now? Before he could answer, a horn shattered the night, 3 sharp blasts that made Kale go rigid. The southern watchtower. His voice had turned to ice. We are under attack. He gripped her hand, pulling her toward the tent's entrance. Stay with Morna. Do not leave the inner walls, no matter what you hear. Kale, promise me. His eyes blazed. Promise me, Elowen. She nodded, throat tight, and watched him transform mid-stride into a massive silver wolf that bounded into the darkness. And as the sounds of battle began to echo through the mountains, Elowen pressed her hand to her heart and felt the bond pulse with a single, terrifying truth. She loved him, and she might lose him before she ever had the chance to say it. The camp erupted into controlled chaos. Elowen watched from the entrance of Kale's tent as men transformed into wolves, and wolves positioned themselves along the tree line, a living wall of fur and fangs. Those who remained in human form armed themselves with blades that gleamed silver in the moonlight. Stay inside. Brennan appeared beside her, his face grim. No matter what happens, do not let them see you. But you should do as you are told. His tone softened slightly. Kale has claimed you. If Varric sees you now, smelling of our alpha, it will give him the justification he needs for war. Elowen wanted to argue, but the logic was undeniable. She retreated into the tent, her hand pressed to the claiming bite that still throbbed with residual heat. Through the canvas walls, She heard voices raised in confrontation. One voice rose above the others, cultured, cold, familiar enough to make her stomach clench with terror. "Varric, I know she is here." His voice carried the lazy confidence of a man who had never been denied. "My property, my betrothed. Return her, and we need not make this unpleasant." "You speak of a woman as property." Kale's response was dangerously calm. "This tells me everything I need to know about your character. Character is a luxury for those without power." Varric's tone sharpened. "I will ask once more. Produce the girl, or face the consequences." "She is not here." A pause. Then Varric laughed, a sound that scraped across Elowen's nerves like broken glass. "You lie poorly, Wolf King. I felt my binding mark shatter an hour ago. Whatever trick you used to break it, she was close enough for me to feel her pain." His voice dropped to something intimate, obscene. "I always feel her pain. It is the sweetest part of owning her." Elowen's hands trembled. Morna, who had slipped into the tent behind her, gripped her shoulders firmly. "Steady, child. He cannot touch you here." "He will not stop," Elowen whispered. "You do not know him. He will burn the entire north to ash before he lets me go. Then he will burn." Morna's voice was iron. "And our alpha will scatter those ashes to the wind." Outside, the confrontation had grown more heated. Elowen heard the ring of steel being drawn, heard growls rising from the wolves that flanked their king. "You claim territory that does not belong to you," Kale was saying. "You practice blood magic forbidden by the old accords. You speak of a free woman as property, and now you threaten war over a bride who fled your cruelty." A pause. "Leave my lands, Varric. There will be no second warning." "You think I fear your mongrel pack?" Varric's composure finally cracked, revealing the venom beneath. "I have armies. I have mages who can turn your wolves inside out with a word. I have the king's own sanction to cleanse these territories of your kind." "Then bring your armies," Kale replied, his voice dropping to a register that made Elowen's skin prickle. "Bring your mages. Bring your king himself. I will still be here when they are dust." Something in his tone must have penetrated even Varric's arrogance. When he spoke again, his voice had turned calculating. "Very well. Keep your stray for now. But know this. Wolf King, she carries something inside her that belongs to me, a power I have spent years cultivating. Sooner or later she will use it, and when she does, I will know exactly where to find her." Hoofbeats retreated into the night, but Elowen barely heard them. "A power I have spent years cultivating." He knew. Varric had always known about her veil touch. The betrothal, the binding, all of it had been designed to harvest a gift she had spent her entire life hiding. The tent flap opened, and Kale entered. His pale gaze found hers immediately, and she saw the question in them, the same question everyone eventually asked once they learned what she could do. "He spoke of a power," Kale said quietly. "Something you carry." Elowen closed her eyes. The claiming bite pulsed against her throat, a reminder that she was bound to this man now, whether she wished it or not. She could lie, she could deflect as she had done her entire life, but he had saved her. He had marked her as his own to protect her from a monster. He deserved the truth, even if it damned her. "I am a veil walker," she said softly. "I can reach through the boundary between life and death. I can heal wounds that should be fatal by pulling souls back from the edge of the void." She opened her eyes to meet his gaze. "In Valdris, they call it witchcraft. They burn women for less." Kale was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, he crossed the tent to stand before her. He reached out, and Elowen tensed, expecting rejection, disgust, fear. Instead, his fingers brushed gently across her cheek. "Among my people," he said, "such a gift would be sacred, honored." His thumb traced the line of her jaw. "You have spent your life hiding what you are. Here, you do not have to hide." Tears spilled down Elowen's cheeks before she could stop them. "You do not fear what I can do?" "I fear many things." Kale's voice was rough. "Losing my people, failing my duty, watching the old ways die." His storm-colored eyes held hers with an intensity that stole her breath. "I do not fear you, Elowen, and I never will." She did not know who moved first, only that suddenly she was in his arms, her face pressed against his chest, his hand cradling the back of her head as she wept out years of loneliness and terror and desperate secrecy. And through the claiming bite, she felt something impossible, his own emotions flowing into her like a river breaking through a dam. Wonder, protectiveness, and beneath it all, the first stirring of something that felt dangerously like destiny. The Thornwood stronghold rose from the mountain like a living thing. Elowen had expected a castle, cold stone and iron gates. Instead, she found a fortress built into the rock itself, its walls seamlessly merging with ancient trees whose roots plunged deep into the earth. Bridges of woven branches connected towers that seemed to grow rather than stand. And everywhere she looked, wolves moved among humans with easy familiarity. "Welcome to Cragshallow," Morna said as their convoy passed through the main gate. "Home of the Thornwood Pack for 17 generations." Elowen stared in wonder. She had grown up hearing stories of the northern shifters, savage beasts who devoured children and burned villages. The reality was something far more complex. She saw families gathered around cooking fires, children chasing each other through the lower courtyards, elders teaching young wolves how to track scent on the wind. A community. A people. In the week that followed, Elowen found herself drawn deeper into the rhythm of pack life. Morna took her as an apprentice of sorts, teaching her the Thornwood methods of healing that complemented her own gifts. The claiming bite on her throat had healed to a silvery scar, and though she caught pack members staring at it with curiosity and sometimes concern, no one treated her with anything less than respect. Kale, however, had grown distant. He fulfilled his duties as alpha with tireless dedication, settling disputes, training warriors, meeting with scouts who brought news of Varric's movements along the southern border. But he rarely sought Elowen's company, and when their paths crossed, his gaze would hold hers for only a moment before he looked away. It confused her, it hurt her, and it made the strange ache in her chest grow worse with each passing day. "You feel it, don't you?" Morna asked one evening as Elowen pressed her hand to her sternum, trying to ease the hollow pain that had become her constant companion. "Feel what?" "The incomplete bond." Morna's weathered face was grave. "A claiming bite is only the first step. Without the full mating ritual, the connection remains. Unfinished. It will call to you, demanding completion." Elowen's cheeks flushed. "And if it remains incomplete?" Morna did not answer, but the shadows in her eyes spoke volumes. That night, Elowen woke to find herself standing at Kale's chamber door with no memory of walking there. Her hand was raised to knock, her body trembling with a need she could not name. She fled back to her own room in shame, but sleep would not come. Instead, she lay awake until dawn, feeling the phantom echo of his heartbeat through the bond that connected them. 10 days after their arrival, Brennan came to her with news that turned her blood to ice. "Varric has gathered his forces at the southern pass, 3,000 men, plus mages from the Crown's own circle." Brennan's jaw was tight. "He means to invade within the fortnight." "Because of me," Elowen whispered. "Because of many things. But yes, you are the excuse he needed." The War Council met that evening in the Great Hall. Elowen was not invited, but she watched from the gallery above as Kale stood before his commanders, his presence filling the room like a physical force. "We cannot match their numbers," one grizzled warrior argued. 3,000 against our 800? It is suicide. "Numbers mean nothing in our territory," Kale replied calmly. "The mountains are ours. The forests answer to us. Varric's army will break against Cragshallow like waves against stone." "And the mages?" Brennan pressed. "The Crown Circle knows how to kill our kind. They have been studying us for decades." A heavy silence fell over the hall. Elowen's hands gripped the gallery railing. This was her fault. Her presence had brought war to these people who had shown her nothing but kindness. She knew what she had to do. That night, she packed what little she had and slipped from her chamber. The claiming bite throbbed in protest as she moved toward the stables, but she ignored it. She would find another way to disappear. She would draw Varric away from Thornwood, even if it meant surrendering herself to save Kale's people. She had almost reached the stable door when a voice stopped her cold. "Running again, little Veilwalker?" Elowen spun to find Kyle leaning against the wall, arms crossed, moonlit eyes gleaming in the darkness. He looked exhausted, dark circles beneath his eyes, tension carved into every line of his face, but his gaze missed nothing. "I have to go," she said. "Varric wants me, not your people. If you leave, you die." Kale pushed off the wall and stalked toward her. "The bond is incomplete. You have felt it, the pain, the need. It will only grow worse until your body tears itself apart trying to reach what it cannot have. Then I die protecting those who protected me." Elowen lifted her chin. "A fair trade." Kale stopped inches from her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his skin. "You think your death would protect us?" His voice was rough, almost angry. "You think I claimed you only to watch you destroy yourself? Why did you claim me?" The question burst from her before she could stop it. "You have avoided me for days. You look at me like I am a wound you cannot heal. If the bond is such a burden, why did you—" His mouth crashed into hers. The kiss was desperate, almost savage, nothing like the gentle touch she might have imagined. His hands gripped her waist, pulling her against him, and Elowen gasped into his mouth as the claiming bite flared with sudden heat. Through the bond, she felt his emotions pour into her, desire so fierce it bordered on pain, fear that she would slip away, and beneath it all, a tenderness so profound it brought tears to her eyes. When he finally pulled back, they were both breathing hard. "I have avoided you," Cale said hoarsely, "because every moment near you makes it harder to resist completing the bond, and you deserve a choice, Elowen, not a decision made in desperation or gratitude. And if I choose you?" she whispered. Something like hope flickered in his eyes. But before he could answer, a horn shattered the night, 3 sharp blasts that made Cale go rigid. The southern watchtower. His voice had turned to ice. "We are under attack." He gripped her hand, pulling her toward the main keep. "Stay with Morna. Do not leave the inner walls, no matter what you hear. Cale, promise me." His eyes blazed. "Promise me, Elowen." She nodded, throat tight, and watched him transform mid-stride into a massive silver wolf that bounded into the darkness. And as the sounds of battle began to echo through the mountains, Elowen pressed her hand to her heart and felt the bond pulse with a single, terrifying truth. She loved him, and she might lose him before she ever had the chance to say it. The siege lasted 12 days. Elowen spent them in a haze of exhaustion and barely contained terror, helping Morna tend to the wounded who were carried into the healing halls with increasing frequency. She learned to stitch flesh and set bones, to brew draughts that eased pain and poultices that drew infection. She discovered that her veil touch, so feared in Valdris, was celebrated here that when she laid her hands on a dying warrior and pulled him back from the edge of the void, the other healers wept with gratitude rather than recoiling in horror. But the true battle was the one raging inside her own body. The incomplete bond had become a constant torment. Every hour away from Cale brought fresh waves of pain, deep aches in her bones, a hollow burning in her chest, a need so desperate it drove her to pace the halls at night like a caged animal. She caught glimpses of him between skirmishes, his silver fur streaked with blood, his human form bearing new wounds each time he returned. She could not speak to him, could not touch him, could only feel his exhaustion and determination flowing through the bond like water through a cracked dam. And through it all, the dreams came. Every night, Cale came to her in sleep. He would kneel beside her bed, stroke her hair, whisper words in the old tongue that somehow she understood perfectly. "Hold on, my flame. Just a little longer. I will end this, and then I will never leave your side again." She would reach for him, desperate to touch him, but always he faded like mist before her fingers could find purchase. "Are they real?" she asked Morna one morning, her voice hoarse from sleeplessness. "The dreams. Is it truly him?" Morna's expression was troubled. The bond can create bridges between minds, especially when one partner is in distress, whether he is consciously reaching for you or simply calling out in his own dreams. She shook her head. "I cannot say." On the 13th day, the siege broke. Elowen heard the horns sound victory and rushed to the battlements with the other healers. Below, the remnants of Varric's army fled south through the mountain passes, harried by wolves that snapped at their heels. But something was wrong. She felt it through the bond, a sudden absence, like a candle being snuffed. Where Kyle's presence had been a constant warmth at the edge of her consciousness, there was now only cold silence. "Cale." His name tore from her throat. "Where is Cale?" Brennan appeared at the gate, human again but covered in blood. His face was ashen. The Alpha fell. One of the crown mages, she had a blade dipped in something we have never seen. He took the wound, protecting 2 of our young wolves. Elowen was running before he finished speaking. She found Cale in his chambers, laid out on his own bed, surrounded by warriors who parted silently as she approached. The wound on his chest was horrific, a gash that ran from shoulder to hip, the flesh around it blackened and raw in a way that reminded her sickeningly of something she had seen before. The poison, the same corruption that Varric had used in his binding magic. "He made this for you," she realized with dawning horror. Varric created a weapon specifically designed to kill through the claiming bond. If Cale died, she would die. The incomplete bond would tear her soul apart. But more than that, if Cale died, the man she loved would be gone from the world, and that was a grief she could not bear. "Everyone out." Her voice carried an authority she had never known she possessed. The warriors hesitated, looking to Brennan. "Do as she says." Brennan's voice was hollow. "If anyone can save him, it is her." The room emptied. Elowen knelt beside Cale's still form, studying the wound with her healer's eye. Dark corruption spread like black frost toward his heart. She had perhaps an hour before it reached its target. She had never attempted something like this. Her veil touch could pull souls back from the edge of death, But Kale was not dying, he was being murdered from within by magic designed to destroy. "I cannot do this alone," she whispered. But as she pressed her hands to his chest, she felt something stir deep within, something wild and fierce that had been growing since the night he had claimed her, the wolf spirit she had not yet learned to command, sleeping beneath her human skin. It rose now, called by her desperation, awakened by the threat to its mate. Elowen closed her eyes and reached into herself, into that primal power that had terrified her since the bite. She let it merge with her veil touch, the healing gift she had hidden her whole life, and when she opened her eyes again, they blazed gold. Her hands glowed with light that was silver and violet intertwined. She plunged her power into Kale's wound. The corruption fought her with malevolent intelligence. It was Varric's magic. She realized a piece of his cruel soul embedded in the poison, designed to recognize her and twist the knife. It whispered to her as she fought it, speaking in Varric's voice. "You think you can escape me, little witch? You belong to me. You will always belong to me." "I belong to no one," Elowen snarled through gritted teeth. "And certainly not to you." She pushed harder, her merged powers burning through the corruption inch by inch. The pain was exquisite, every nerve in her body screaming, but she refused to stop. She would die before she let Varric's poison claim the man she loved. Minutes stretched into eternity. The corruption retreated, driven back toward the original wound, where Elowen trapped it and burned it to nothing with the full force of her will. When it was finally over, she collapsed across Kale's chest, her vision swimming, her body utterly spent. But beneath her ear, she heard his heartbeat steady and strong and wonderfully alive. "You foolish woman," she thought she heard him whisper. "You brave, beautiful, foolish woman." Then darkness claimed her, and she knew nothing more. Elowen woke in an unfamiliar bed, her body aching as though she had been trampled by horses. Pale morning light filtered through carved shutters, and for a moment, she could not remember where she was or how she had gotten there. Then the memories returned in a flood, the poison, her desperate healing, the feel of Kale's heartbeat beneath her cheek. She sat up too quickly, and the room spun. "Easy." Morna's hands guided her back against the pillows. "You nearly killed yourself, child. Your body needs time to recover." "Kale." Elowen's voice was a rasp. "Is he alive, thanks to you? He woke 2 days ago and has barely left your bedside since." Morna's expression was complicated gratitude mixed with deep concern. "But there is something you need to know, Elowen. Something that cannot wait any longer." Elowen's heart clenched. "What is it?" Before Morna could answer, the door opened, and Kale entered. He looked haggard, dark circles under his pale eyes, several days' growth of beard shadowing his jaw, but alive. Gloriously, impossibly alive. "Leave us," he said to Morna. His voice was gentle but brooked no argument. The old healer hesitated, then nodded and slipped from the room. Kale crossed to the bed and sank onto its edge, his eyes never leaving Elowen's face. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then he reached out and took her hand in both of his, pressing her knuckles to his lips. "You saved my life," he said roughly, "and you nearly destroyed yourself in the process. I could not let you die." The words came out thick with emotion. "The bond. This was not about the bond." Kale's gaze blazed. "I felt you fighting for me, Elowen. I felt your love pouring into me even as I lay in darkness. Do not tell me this was merely about survival." Tears spilled down her cheeks. No, it was not merely about survival. His hand cupped her face, thumb brushing away her tears. "I have loved you since the moment I pulled you from my wagon, bleeding and defiant and more beautiful than anything I had ever seen. I fought it because I knew you deserved a choice, because I did not want you to feel trapped by a bond you never asked for." His voice broke slightly. "But I cannot fight it anymore. I love you, Elowen. Whatever comes next, I need you to know that. Whatever comes next." Fear coiled in her stomach. "Kale, what are you not telling me?" His expression shifted, the tenderness giving way to something darker. "When you healed me, you used both your veil touch and the wolf spirit from the claiming bite. You merged them in a way that should not have been possible. I had no choice. It was the only way to burn through Varric's corruption. I know. And it saved my life." He paused, visibly steeling himself. "But it also accelerated something that was already happening inside you. The transformation. Elowen, your human body is trying to become one of us, and your veil touch is fighting the change." Cold dread washed through her. "What does that mean?" Morna's voice came from the doorway. She had returned, her face grave. "It means your two powers are at war within you. Your healing magic keeps destroying the wolf spirit before it can complete the transformation, but each time it does, it drains more of your life force." Elowen stared at her. "Are you saying your body cannot sustain this battle forever?" Kale said quietly. If you continue fighting the transformation, your magic will eventually burn through everything that keeps you alive. And if I stop fighting? The silence that followed was answer enough. Most humans cannot survive the change, Morna said softly. Your veil touch has kept you alive longer than any should have lasted, but it has also made the final transformation more difficult. If you surrender to the wolf spirit now, your chances of survival are 1 in 10, Elowen finished hollowly. Perhaps less. Kale's grip on her hand tightened. There may be another way, if we sever the claiming bond completely. No. The word came out fierce, absolute. I will not lose you. I refuse. Elowen, I spent my entire life hiding what I am, running from anyone who might discover my gift, terrified that love would only bring betrayal and pain. She reached up to touch his face, her fingers trembling against his jaw. And then I hid in your wagon, and you pulled me into the light, and everything I believed about myself was wrong. Her voice broke. I would rather die trying to stay with you than live a single day without this bond. Kale's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. You would risk death for me? I would risk anything for you. She pulled him closer until their foreheads touched. I love you, Kale. I love you with everything I am. And if my body must change to keep loving you, then I will change. He kissed her, then soft and desperate, and tasting of salt from both their tears. When they finally parted, Morna spoke from the doorway. There is one thing that might improve her chances. Tomorrow night is the blood moon, the night when the wolf spirit is strongest. If she attempts the transformation then, with the pack's energy to support her, 1 in 5, Kale said quietly. Perhaps 1 in 4. Still terrible odds. But better than dying slowly from a war she could not win. Elowen looked into Kale's eyes and saw her own determination reflected there. Tomorrow night, she said. I will be ready. But as Kale held her close and Morna began preparing the ritual space, Elowen could not shake the cold certainty that settled in her bones. One way or another, by the time the blood moon set, everything would be different. And some part of her, the part that whispered from the edge of the void she had touched so many times, knew that death was already circling, patient as a wolf, waiting to see which way she would fall. The ritual chamber lay deep beneath Cragshallow, carved from the living rock by hands that had turned to dust 1,000 years ago. Ancient symbols covered every surface, wolves running, moons rising, figures caught mid-transformation between human and beast. Torches cast flickering shadows across the stone, and through a circular opening in the ceiling, Elowen could see the blood moon rising, swollen and red against the night sky. The entire pack had gathered. Hundreds of wolves and humans filled the chamber's edges, their combined energy pressing against Elowen's skin like a warm tide. She stood at the center, wearing only a simple white shift, her feet bare against the cold stone floor. Kale stood before her, his pale gaze holding hers with fierce intensity. You do not have to do this, he said quietly, pitching his voice beneath the murmur of the crowd. We could find another way. There is always another way. There is no other way. Elowen reached up to touch his face one final time. And even if there were, I would still choose this. I would still choose you. He caught her hand and pressed a kiss to her palm. If something goes wrong, then I will die knowing I was loved. She smiled through the tears that threatened to fall. That is more than I ever dared hope for. Morna stepped forward, her ancient voice carrying across the chamber. The moon reaches its apex. We must begin. Kale released Elowen's hand and stepped back to join the circle of pack elders. The loss of his touch felt like a physical wound, but Elowen forced herself to stand straight, to face what was coming with dignity. Close your eyes, Morna instructed. Feel the wolf spirit within you. Do not fight it. Do not try to control it. Simply surrender. Elowen obeyed. In the darkness behind her eyelids, she became aware of two forces coiling within her veil touch, silver and cool, and the wolf spirit, gold and burning. They circled each other like wary predators, neither willing to yield. Let go, she whispered to herself. Stop fighting. Let it happen. The wolf spirit surged forward, and pain exploded through her body. Elowen heard herself scream as her bones began to crack and reform. But even as the transformation started, her veil touch rose to meet it, flooding her system with healing energy that fought to preserve her human form. The two powers clashed inside her like storms meeting at sea. Through the agony, she heard voices, Morna shouting instructions, pack members crying out in alarm, Kale calling her name with desperate intensity. She is fighting herself, someone said. Her magic will not release. Elowen, Kale's voice cut through the chaos. You have to let go. Please, my flame, you have to. His words cut off in a strangled cry. Elowen's eyes snapped open. Chaos had erupted in the ritual chamber. Figures in black cloaks had poured through hidden passages in the walls. Varric's assassins, she realized with horror, sent to strike while the pack was focused on the ritual, and at the chamber's entrance, locked in combat with 3 of them, was Cale. She saw the blade before she could scream a warning. It plunged into Cale's back, and he fell. No. The word tore from Elowen's throat with supernatural force, and something within her shattered completely. Not her body, something deeper, some final barrier between her 2 warring powers that had kept them separate, kept them fighting. In the space of a heartbeat, her veil touch and her wolf spirit stopped circling each other and merged. The transformation that followed was nothing like the gradual agony of before. It was instantaneous, overwhelming, absolute. One moment she was human, screaming her beloved's name. The next, she was wolf silver-white fur rippling across her form, golden eyes blazing with power that was both healer and predator combined. She moved without thought, pure instinct driving her across the chamber. The assassins who stood between her and Cale did not even have time to raise their weapons before she was upon them, her new body a blur of fang and fury. In seconds, they were down. She shifted back to human form as she reached Cale's side, her hands already glowing with merged power, silver and gold intertwined. The wound in his back was grievous, the blade having pierced dangerously close to his heart. "Stay with me," she commanded, pressing her palms to the wound. "You do not have permission to die, Cale of Thornwood. Do you hear me? You are mine, and I will not let you go." Her power poured into him, but this time there was no war within her. Her veil touch and wolf spirit worked together, the healing magic strengthened by primal energy, the wild power tempered by her gift for pulling souls back from the void. She felt Cale slipping away, felt his life force flickering like a candle in the wind. She reached into that space between life and death that only she could see, found the thread of his soul, and pulled with everything she had. "Come back to me," she whispered fiercely. "Come back to me, my flame, my mate, my home." For an endless moment, nothing happened. Then Cale gasped, his body arching beneath her hands, and his eyes flew open, not silver now, but blazing gold, his wolf rising to meet hers. Elowen. Her name was a prayer on his lips. Around them, the pack had subdued the remaining assassins. Silence fell over the chamber as everyone watched their alpha and his mate, kneeling in a pool of blood and moonlight. The transformation, Morna breathed. It worked. She is one of us. But Elowen barely heard her. She was lost in Cale's golden eyes, feeling the bond between them pulse with new strength. It was no longer incomplete, no longer a fragile thread threatening to snap. It was a bridge, solid and eternal, connecting 2 souls that had finally found their way to each other. "You saved me," Cale said hoarsely. "Again, we saved each other." Elowen cupped his face in her hands. "But the bond it still needs." "I know." He sat up slowly, wincing at the residual pain, and turned his head to bare his throat. "Claim me, Elowen. Make it complete. Make us complete." She did not hesitate. Her teeth found the curve of his neck, and she bit down with new fangs that knew exactly how deep to go, exactly how to mark him as hers for all eternity. His blood sang on her tongue, wild and ancient and perfect, and through the bond, she felt their souls crash together like 2 rivers joining the same sea. His emotions flooded into her completely now. Love so vast it could fill oceans. Relief so profound it brought tears streaming down both their faces. And beneath it all, a joy that blazed like the sun rising after endless night. "Mine," she growled against his throat. "Yours," he answered. "Always yours." When she lifted her head, the entire pack had transformed. Hundreds of wolves surrounded them, heads thrown back, howling at the blood moon in celebration of their alpha's completed bond. Cale helped Elowen to her feet, and together they faced their people, their family now, she realized. This wild, fierce, beautiful family that had accepted her when her own world had cast her out. "Welcome home," Cale murmured against her hair. "Welcome home, my mate." Elowen looked around the chamber at the wolves who howled her name, at Morna who wept with joy, at Brennan who actually smiled for the first time since she had met him. Home. She had spent her whole life running, hiding, terrified that her true self would bring only destruction, and instead, it had brought her here to a people who celebrated what she was, to a mate who loved her completely, to a place where she finally, truly belonged. "I am home," she whispered, and the words tasted like truth. Above them, the blood moon blazed red and triumphant, blessing the union of 2 souls that had been destined to find each other across all the distances that fate could devise. And in the heart of Cragshallow, surrounded by the song of her pack, Elowen finally understood what she had been searching for all along. Not safety, not escape, not even survival, but this love fierce enough to transform her, and a home worth fighting for. At last, she was exactly where she was meant to be,